Imagine you're riding a school bus at night, the eerie silence broken only by the hum of the engine. The night seems ordinary until you feel a cold chill and something feels off. Your heart races and you can't shake the feeling that something is watching you. In today's video, we'll share 3 terrifying school bus encounters that are sure to make you rethink your next ride. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are diving into 3 spine-chilling school bus stories for you. These encounters will make you look twice the next time you step on a bus. So sit back, grab a snack, and let's dive into these terrifying experiences. Story 1. The Midnight Ride by Rayan. My name is Ryan, and this happened to me when I was in middle school. It was one of those nights where everything just felt off. I had stayed late at school for a project and missed the bus. My parents couldn't come to pick me up, so I had no choice but to take the late bus, the one that drops off the kids who live in the more remote parts of town. I'd never taken that bus before, and to be honest, I wasn't sure what to expect. The late bus was different from the usual school buses. For one thing, it wasn't the bright yellow, cheerful vehicle that you usually associate with school buses. No, this bus was older, darker, and its headlights seemed too dim for the time of night. The other thing that made me uneasy was the bus driver. She was a woman I had never seen before, and she didn't speak a word to any of the kids, not even a polite greeting. She just focused on driving, her eyes fixed ahead, unblinking and rigid. The ride started out normally enough. The few kids that were on the bus sat in silence, either looking out the windows or talking in hushed tones. As the bus drove down the empty streets, I tried to distract myself by staring out the window. The sky was dark, and the streetlights flickered as we passed by them, casting long shadows on the road. But something felt strange as the bus started to slow down. We were nearing the last stop, but it wasn't my stop. I still had a good few miles to go. The bus slowed down far too early, and the driver didn't even make an attempt to speak or acknowledge it. We came to a stop in front of an old, dilapidated house at the edge of the woods. It was dark, and there were no lights except for the dull glow from the street lamps, which barely lit up the area. The house itself was run down, with broken windows and a collapsing porch. There were no kids waiting at the stop. No one ever had been, as far as I knew. And yet the bus came to a stop there, as if it had been called by some invisible force. I started to feel uneasy, my heart thumping in my chest. The driver, Mrs. Hill, didn't acknowledge the stop at all. She just turned around, her eyes locking onto mine. "You need to get off here," she said quietly, her voice flat, almost robotic. I froze, confused and scared. No, my stop is farther down," I stammered, my throat tightening with anxiety. But Mrs. Hill didn't budge. She stared at me, her gaze cold and unyielding. "Get off now," she repeated, her voice taking on a harder edge, as though she knew I had no choice. My heart pounded in my chest, and I knew I couldn't argue. There was something deeply unsettling about her, about the way she spoke. It was as if she wasn't just the bus driver anymore. She was something else entirely, something I couldn't comprehend. I grabbed my backpack, my hands shaking as I stood up. But as I made my way toward the front of the bus, something strange happened. The bus jerked forward suddenly, as if it had been pulled by an unseen force. I stumbled back, the jolt throwing me off balance. The doors slammed shut in front of me with an ominous thud. The bus didn't stop. It sped off, its wheels screeching as it accelerated far faster than I had ever seen a bus go. My heart raced in my chest as I stood on the curb, watching it disappear down the road, the lights growing smaller and smaller in the distance. I ran down the street after it, but no matter how fast I moved, the bus was already gone. There was nothing, no headlights, no sound. It was as if the bus had evaporated into thin air. I looked back toward the old house, expecting to see it looming in the distance. But when I turned around, the house was gone. It wasn't there anymore. Only trees and the dark road stretching out before me. The whole scene had changed, like a bad dream that was trying to wipe itself from my memory. I stood there, paralyzed with fear, wondering if I had imagined the entire thing. Had I really been on that bus? Had Mrs. Hill been real? I never saw her again after that night. Years have passed since then, but I've never forgotten that eerie feeling. I still don't know what happened that night. The strange bus, the silent driver, and the house that shouldn't have been there. It's as if time and reality bent and shifted around me. No one else who was on the bus that night ever said a word about it, and to this day, I can't explain what I saw. Story 2, The Silent Passenger by Sarah. I'm Sarah, and this story took place a few years ago when I was in high school. I had been riding the same school bus for months, and the routine was always the same. Get on, sit in the same seat, and head to school. It was simple, uneventful. That is, until one morning when something completely bizarre happened. The bus was packed as usual, and I managed to grab my usual spot in the back. I slipped my headphones in and tried to tune out the noise of the other kids, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. We stopped at our usual stops, picking up kids as we went, but when we reached the next one, I noticed something that caught my eye. There was a girl standing outside, her back turned toward the bus. She was dressed all in black, her face hidden beneath a large hood. She didn't move a muscle as the bus approached, and I remember thinking how strange it was that she didn't even flinch when the bus stopped. The door opened, but she didn't step on like the others. Instead, she stood there, her face still hidden beneath the hood, and she stared directly at me, locking eyes with me through the window. I could feel my heart start to race, my stomach twisting in fear. There was something wrong with her, something off about the way she looked at me. For a moment, I couldn't look away. She didn't smile, didn't move. She just stood there, her eyes unblinking, almost like she was waiting for me to make the first move. Finally, the door opened fully, and I thought maybe she was going to get on, but she didn't. Instead, she took a step forward, her eyes never leaving mine. "Is she getting on?" I whispered to the girl sitting next to me, who was looking equally nervous. The girl shook her head, her voice trembling. "No one gets on at this stop. It's just us." I was confused. If she wasn't getting on, why was she standing there? Why was she looking at me like that? The bus driver, Mrs. Gray, seemed unfazed by the strange scene. She didn't hesitate for a second and simply motioned for the girl to come aboard. The girl, without saying a word, took another step toward the bus. But just before she could reach the door, she stopped dead in her tracks. Her head tilted slightly and she smiled. An eerie, cold smile that sent a chill down my spine. I could feel my entire body freeze as I stared back at her. The bus lurched forward, the doors slamming shut with a deafening thud. When I looked out the window, she was gone. The stop was completely empty. No girl, no one standing there at all. The ride continued, but the rest of the journey felt like a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened, something that didn't belong. That girl, the way she looked at me, the way she smiled, it was like she wasn't from this world. The next day, I asked my friends if they had seen her, but none of them had. They said I was imagining things, but I know what I saw. To this day, I can't explain it. I'm convinced that she wasn't just some girl waiting for the bus. She was something else, something otherworldly, and I'll never forget that chilling smile. Story 3, The Vanishing Driver by Mark. My name is Mark, and I was in 7th grade when this happened. Like most of the kids in my town, I took the bus to school every day. We had a regular driver, Mr. Daniels, who had been driving the route for years. He was a friendly, cheerful guy who always greeted us with a smile and a wave. He was just one of those people who seemed to fit into the background of your daily life. But everything changed one cold winter afternoon. It had been snowing heavily all day, and the roads were slick and icy. The bus was running late, and I remember feeling frustrated as I waited outside in the snow, watching the clock tick by. When the bus finally arrived, I noticed something strange. Mr. Daniels, usually so upbeat, looked off. He was staring straight ahead, his grip tight on the steering wheel. His knuckles were white, and his face was pale, as if he hadn't slept in days. He didn't greet anyone. He didn't even make eye contact with anyone as we climbed aboard. The atmosphere on the bus felt heavy, and I could tell that something wasn't right. The ride to school was silent, except for the occasional sound of the tires crunching against the snow. Mr. Daniels drove more slowly than usual, his eyes constantly darting to the rearview mirror as though he was searching for something. When we reached a side street, I saw him look back at the mirror, his eyes widening in fear. He quickly turned away, and I could swear I saw his hands tremble as he gripped the wheel tighter. I looked back, but there was nothing behind us. No other cars, no figures in the snow. Just an empty road stretching out behind us. By the time we reached my stop, I was feeling uncomfortable, almost uneasy. I got off the bus and waved goodbye to Mr. Daniels. But before I could step away, I noticed something strange. The bus didn't drive away slowly like it usually did. It accelerated, speeding down the road at an unnaturally fast pace. I watched as it disappeared into the distance. But then something happened. The bus vanished. Just like that, one moment it was there, its lights glowing in the snow, and the next it was gone. There was no sign of it, no headlights, no sound, no bus in sight. I stood there for a moment, confused and terrified. Had I imagined it? I turned to walk home, trying to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But the next day, I heard something that sent a chill down my spine. Mr. Daniels had vanished. There were reports of his disappearance, and the bus was nowhere to be found. No one had seen him or the bus since the day I got off. To this day, I still don't know what happened. All I know is that something strange and unexplainable happened that day, and I haven't taken the bus to school since. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more creepy stories. Which of these stories gave you a chilling experience? Let us know. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are real.